I guess maybe we should do a roll call to make sure everybody's audio and everything is working fine. You want to do that, Amico?
Sure. So we'll start with you, Dawn.
Yes.
And Commissioner Texler.
Here.
Commissioner Delagnu.
Yes.
Commissioner Humayun. Commissioner Klein.
Here.
Okay, let the record show that Commissioner Whedon, Texler, Delagnu, and Klein are present at the January 11th, 2021 Environmental Commission meeting. And Commissioners Juan and Humayun are absent.
Okay, Amico, any opening comments before we move to public comments?
Oh, hi, Sally. And Sally Meadows is here, our council liaison. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. So that was, I guess that's an announcement because we had Mayor Pepper as our liaison. And so now it will be Councilmember Meadows.
Hi, thank you, everybody. I'm just going to lurk quietly in the background and I won't interrupt your workflow. But I'm also the alternate on Silicon Valley Clean Energy, so there'll be some tie-ins there. So I look forward to learning about all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just to let everyone know, Commissioner Autumn Luyan has resigned from the commission. That's all the
Amico, I think it partially due to her relocation. She's moved to San Francisco, so we'll miss her.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first item of business is public comments for any items not on the agenda. Do we have any member of the public wishing to speak? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to items for consideration and action. And the first item is the Environmental Commission meetings for the regular meeting of December 14th, 2020.
And no comments on the minutes.
Any other comments from commissioners on the minutes of the meeting?
I move approval of the minutes.
Laura? Do I have a second for the approval of the minutes?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bruno. Any other comments or questions? Then I'll call for an action on it. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Aye?
Aye.
I guess we should have Miko do a roll call since it's hard.
Sure. Okay. Commissioner Whedon?
Aye, yes.
Commissioner Texler?
Yes.
Commissioner Delagnu?
Yes.
Commissioner Klein?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 4-0.
Okay, so the second item of business is a discussion of our work plan that was included with the agenda. And there's two parts I think we can go over with any update on any of our current activities. And then at the end of the work plan, which we can take up, is my summary of our discussion for items for the next work plan. So it's in a draft form. So the first item on the work plan, and I'm sorry, I had to call it up here and look at it at the same time. So the first item on there, I don't think there's any update on the reach codes, except I did see it go out that we're expecting approval from the state here sometime this month, I believe, or towards the end of the month. Is there any update on that, Amico?
No, the original date with the CEC was the 13th of this month, and it got pushed out to the 25th. So it should be on the 25th unless I hear otherwise.
And to remind commissioners, that's the final step in the reach codes becoming effective, is the approval by the California Energy Commission. The next has to do an update with the climate action, the update to our climate action plan. Miko, maybe you want to give the commissioners a briefing on the next steps that you see on that.
Yeah, so we did complete the contract with our consultant EcoShift, and we are scheduled to have the kickoff meeting this Thursday, January 14th. And the Environmental Commission Subcommittee for the Climate Action Plan will be included in that kickoff meeting. So they're putting together the agenda for that, and it'll be linked to the link that you received. So the subcommittee, if you did not receive that link from EcoShift, let me know because I can forward that to you.
So
Hopefully.
this is the very start, and maybe for the broader commission, Amico, want to say a few words on the schedule for the work on the update for the climate action plan?
I don't have that schedule in front of me, but so we're starting. So January is the kickoff, and then right after that, we're going to be going through getting all the data over to the consultant. That'll probably be within the next couple months, and then we'll start doing the planning, and I believe they will present to the Environmental Commission twice. So in between that, the subcommittee will have the opportunity to work with staff and the consultant during the planning process, and then scheduled to hopefully have everything completed by November or December of this year, if all goes well.
Yeah, and I think the first step is verification of the review of the existing data, which will take a couple of months, I believe, from our initial climate action plan, and making sure and updating that data for current time, and then beginning to evaluate new actions and things like that. But I think the first couple of months is really review and analysis of data. So it isn't, I don't know exactly when the first meeting with the Environmental Commission will be, but it's out several months. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Amico.
No, you are correct.
Any other questions from commissioners on the update for the climate action plan? Okay, we'll move on then. On the green infrastructure and other environmental plans, there's really no change in that. We've talked about before the green infrastructure that was approved by the City Council in July, and the integrated pest management plan that was finalized in August. I don't think that there's anything else that needs to be updated there. The following subject on our work item is the solid waste. And Amico, maybe you can remind us of, you put out an inquiry to Mission Trails Waste to update us with the status of their work. And I think that a date was accepted on that. Do you have anything else that maybe you can add or advise commissioners on?
So that will be they agreed to speak at our March 8th Environmental Commission meeting. You know, I don't have specifics on exactly what they're going to go over just yet because they just accepted that particular date. But I'm hoping that they'll share more of the recent highlights and go through some of the collection service agreement that was recently executed last year.
And also,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
what we have, you're probably going to say the same thing, but perhaps some more information about, you know, our direction with single-use plastics, and you know what they're currently able to recycle, compost, what their process is for the, you know, current quote-unquote compostable plastic. You know, just kind of an update on that.
Yeah, that would be a good time for that. So if any of the commissioners want to put together some questions for them, you can prepare that ahead of time for the March 8th meeting.
I also note and wanted to ask commissioners if they have any questions on the attachment to this agenda item where there's some detail about their contract and rates and also recyclability on the single family recycling program that they have that was attached to the agenda. And so I'll stop there, but there was a whole series of attachments to the agenda there.
Miko, we were supposed to get, weren't we supposed to get something more specific from them actually about the recycling of plastics and the compostable that, I mean, and the products that would be accepted as compostable products? Weren't they supposed to give us something in writing about what they can do and can't do and what they will be able to do in the future?
We did, we did reach out to them about putting together a list. They did not put together a list for us, but said that if we got them specific items, they could tell us whether or not they would be acceptable. It's actually something that I will follow up on them with them, but I don't think they're going to provide us with just a list that says these are the acceptable compostable items. So it's still something.
It's hard to cover everything, obviously, because there's so much out there. But I was wondering if there are specific components in what is deemed compostable foodware, utensils, for example, what is not accepted. So, for example, bioplastics. We know that they may not be accepting some types of bioplastics, so maybe they can, without going through specific items, tell us what is acceptable and not acceptable from a chemical standpoint.
I can definitely ask them, yeah.
I think that would be great to put some of those questions or formulate some of those questions so that maybe we can even provide those, say at our next meeting, so that they have them in advance of the March meeting when they're going to be presenting. I did notice on the attachments that they say plastics number 1 through 7 should go in the recycle bin. One of the questions that I have is, you know, where do they actually market 1 through 7, or do that 1 through 7 goes in the bin, but you know, they only pull out 1 and 2, and the rest just goes with the underflow and out to the garbage. There's those type of questions that I think we should be asking, so that we have an understanding of what's happening currently.
I mean, that's the big issue with plastics as of today, nationwide at least. And then again, we need to ask Mission Trail specific questions, but only 9% of plastic are recycled. And of those, actually 50% are sent overseas, which we don't know exactly what's going on with those, especially right now. So I think, there is a big question mark about what Mission Trail really does and how much do they really recycle out of the plastics that are collected in the bins.
Okay, excuse me, any further questions on the information included from for Mission Trails on the agenda to the worksheet? Or any other comments for preparation for the meeting with Mission Trails?
No, but I think your idea of putting together a list of questions that we can provide them with in advance of the meeting will make sure that we have a meeting that's useful.
I would
Because
say,
yeah.
I agree with that, and I think what we should do is have our questions in so that we have those together by our next meeting, and that would be a month before they appear, so that we have our questions finalized by next week meeting, and hopefully those can get to them and be incorporated in their presentation. Okay, and with the solid waste, we move on to the next item, which is the single-use plastics. And we all know the status of that, the council hearing on it and postponing it, and the view that it'll probably come up sometime in 2021 to be reconsidered. Attached to the work plan was Senate Bill 54, which just was introduced into the current state legislature. So it's a bill that will be considered this legislative session. The bill at 54 just really states that there's a commitment on behalf of the legislature to pass I guess it's a Plastics Recovery Act. I forget exactly how it's phrased. So there's an anticipation of state legislation perhaps this coming session. I'll pause there and I can go on with some other information that I learned on this, but I'll pause there for questions or comments or to open the discussion on the single-use plastics.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real question for us in Los Altos is to try to figure out exactly when we can revisit the single plastic ban, or however we want to call it. But the ordinance that was sent to the council back at the end of last year, I think, and obviously postponing because of current COVID circumstances for businesses. But I think the question would be, when do we revisit this? Is that going to be around mid next year, mid this year, or at the end of this year? I think it depends very much on, whether we go back to somewhat of a normal life by the summer or later. I think that's the only thing.
Miko, has your staff scheduling meeting come up yet where you anticipate as to where this might be in the queue?
We have our meeting scheduled for later this month.
Okay, so then after this month, sort of the overall work plan for the year, and it may know how this fits in once that's determined.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just regarding, I believe, SB 54, do we know, I mean, do we have any more information about this bill, or is it just being submitted as is as a draft? And I mean, I'm assuming there will be some modifications, if obviously as a minimum, to what we have right now in front of us.
Yeah, this is the bill that was introduced, in my understanding, the Plastic Pollution Producer Responsibility Act. The contents of that, or what the requirements will be, are are not yet determined, and they will be developed as this legislature moves on. I actually, because I had an interest in this, and I reached out to an individual, and they put me in contact with a young woman who's been following, who is the information now, or give it to some people offline, or whatever. But I guess I opened up the conversation, so I might as well continue. Basically, she said that the act hasn't, the content of the act has not been determined yet, and it'll actually, the contents will actually be in negotiation amongst the legislators who are involved in producing this bill, the producers that are impact, and in that way, they're lobbyists as well, environmental groups, and the group that's sponsoring the citizen initiative. Now, there's a citizen initiative that has been qualified for the November 2022 ballot. And that initiative is a rather strong initiative. And so the series of these 4 different groups, and actually there's one more group, there's labor. So there'll be a bunch of people that'll be lobbying and trying to put information into this Allen's legislation on what the requirements are going to be. And these groups, labor, environmental groups, and the manufacturers will all lobbying for positions on this bill. And what really is one of the hammers that may force this legislation to come to a head is the initiative. And so what could happen is that, like, all negotiations, they always seem to come down to the wire. And so the deadline is really going to be June of 2022, because that's the time when either the people who have the initiative have to pull the initiative off of the ballot. And if it's after June, then it's on the ballot. And so all these parties have a vested interest of getting the negotiations complete no later than June of 2022. Well, the annual legislature all have to be complete by September if they're going to be enacted and go in effect on a 1/1/2022 category. So there's 2 sort of dates. One is a September date for January 2022 effectiveness, or it could be continued to be a 2-year bill, and then the June 2022 would be the deadline, and it could be as an initiative on the November 2022 ballot. So it's going to be a process that's going to take a while. I think that's the bottom line of it. Any
Yeah, I
questions?
guess what we've seen is just a starting guide, I guess.
It's a placeholder, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? I do have one more piece of information that I'll pass on single-use plastics, and that is the model ordinance that the county put together was presented to the recycling committee of the county, and that's where it currently sits right now. So it was presented to them in draft, and the council the county recycling commission may, or it's now up to their schedule as to when they wish to take up this bill. was a presentation to it, the draft model ordinance. Well, the COVID-19 issue mean that we want to do, we should consider some revisions to the model ordinance. And that's sort of where it sits right now. So now it's up to the recycling committee of the county to pick that up and move that forward. Maybe you have more inside information on that, Amico.
At this time, I don't yet. We haven't met the group that I attend for that, so that'll be later this month, and then hopefully next month I'll have more information if they have updates.
And that was and of course, when I'm talking about the model ordinance, that's the county's model ordinance on single-use plastic foodware and accessories. Any other questions or comments, or should we move on? So the next item is, and I see David Klein's on there on the meeting. So anything new, David? I know it's probably nothing much has happened with the History Museum and our educational efforts. Do you want any update on that, or the following item on the?
I can update a little bit just to keep things fresh in everybody's mind. So the remaining balance in the Environmental Education Fund, I believe is $2,128. After we awarded teams $1,400 from the Envirothon, which was this environmental advocacy competition we had among high school students in the region, which was quite successful. But now the question is, what do we do? You know, initially we were thinking maybe we could do sort of a repeat Envirothon at this Night of Ideas event, which was originally supposed to be, sorry, it's noisy here. It was originally supposed to be in April, and now, of course, that's now we're still in a holding pattern. I have had some brainstorm meetings with some of the players from last time. You know, considering potential virtual Envirothon and what that would look like. I actually have a meeting with the Los Altos History Museum executive director tomorrow to brainstorm this. There's some talk also about maybe pulling off the Night of Ideas in 2021 in some appropriate format. And I've been trying to start to think outside the box in terms of maybe what else could we do with these funds. For example, maybe a different sort of competition, still focused on the schools, but maybe having them document their environmental conservation or environmental advocacy efforts among friends in videos that we can consider. You know, rather than it being a live collaborative event. Other ways of maybe putting on online community resources to educate the public about our efforts, or I mean, both the environmental commission's effort, but the entire community's efforts in the, for example, climate action plan, perhaps getting students involved in helping to create these online resources. So I don't have answers at this point, but I just do want to maybe invite others to also put ideas into the pot so we can do something hopefully this year, and hopefully during the school year if we do want to continue to focus on the schools. But I think we could also leave that as an open question. Maybe doesn't have to be school specific. Maybe it can be more in terms of broader education in the community.
Yeah, David, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Do we have any limitations on how we can use that money that's left?
So the limitations as they were last time around is that they would be awarded to nonprofits or schools. So those were significant
but I think
limitations, I'd say. Yeah.
I think that was in
Laura.
context of the competition, but we as a commission could choose to use them for any other educational purpose we wanted, like if we wanted to print flyers or something like that.
Yeah, I assume so. Yeah, I think the condition came from the previous Los Altos Community Foundation director who said, yeah, to issue a check, this has to go to a nonprofit or a school, but I'm assuming it could be issued to a body, I don't know where it would be issued for us to use those funds for broader education in the community, but I'm sure there's some way to do it. Yeah. I don't know if it goes to the city or to a green town, that is, agrees to cooperate with our efforts or something like that.
Because I think we've had discussions before about trying to increase our education and outreach. And I think with the climate action plan around the corner, I think we're going to need to do that on this specifically. More than anything else, I think, on the agenda so far for 2021. So the question is whether we could set aside at least some of that money for that education and outreach in 2021 for CAP.
I think that's a fair thing to consider if we believe that those funds or a portion of the funds would be an enabler to help to expand or improve the quality of that, or get certain folks involved that help to also get the word out, add energy to it. Yeah.
So what I really heard, David, was, I thank you for setting up and, go ahead with your discussions with the History Museum and your brainstorming. And I think commissioners that may have some ideas that for potential uses for the funds on an outreach of something else that we're working on, like the CAP. So I think we ought to put those into the hopper and see what comes out. The other thing, David, is it may be a little late for this current school year, but hopefully students will be back in school August, September of this year, and maybe we shoot for something during the first quarter or first several months of the next school year, which starts in August or September.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there obviously is a much greater chance of normalcy at that point. So yeah, I was about to say, yeah, if we wanted to set a target for this school year, then working backward from some deadline would be pretty aggressive. We'd want to have a pretty solid plan, pretty solid proposal within a month, which does feel like a huge step change in terms of the pace so far. So I think that's a good suggestion. The combination of having, being able to target schools and their, being potentially post-vaccine. Of course, we don't know what that's going to look like, but sort of a punt. I don't know. I'd like to talk more about it. I'd like to hear others' ideas. I'd like to know, with the climate action plan, what that might look like, their ideas, and what the timing on that would have to be or should be. So whatever the right way to discuss that is, I'd like to do that. If anybody wants to send. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, the way I'm looking at it for the climate action plan, I think in terms of education and outreach, I think it's an ongoing process throughout 2021 or throughout, putting together that plan from where we are or what the previous CAP, said or was put together or what came out of the previous CAP, the reach codes being one thing, for example.
Yes.
What we trying to achieve? How are we going to do it? What the plan is. We can have a system where we can get feedback from the community also on what we're doing as we move forward. These are some of the ideas, and eventually at the end, obviously, communicate the plan to the broader community. But I think these are some ideas. But what I was thinking is maybe have an ongoing type of communication / education process throughout the development of the plan.
Yeah. So, as an example, just to set an example, I had been talking. What's the name of that new sort of food court that is finishing up in town? I keep forgetting the name of that. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody? Yes. So that was supposed to open with a certain amount of hoopla. Of course, that is, yeah. I'm not sure what the plan about that is now, but like putting that to the side, I had been talking to them about putting up some sort of display or a small exhibit showing basically showing about what happened in the Envirothon and providing information about what the teams did or proposed to do and what they did, just because that was viewed as being sort of a prominent new community center that there'd be a certain amount of focus on. And I'd been talking to one of the development directors there about putting something like that in. So I don't know, I'm just trying to set an idea, that maybe we could put some display in there that is educating the public about CAP. And perhaps we could still collaborate with one of the green teams in a school to have them to help put that together as another example of something we could, that would take money to get those materials together. Yeah. Is that like the tenor of the kind of thing you're thinking about?
Can I make a recommendation? if we're going to start to think about, different uses for the money instead of trying to brainstorm as a commission, we might want to form a subcommittee to come up with proposals if we're thinking of doing something different than Virathon, if we want to use some of the money for our own outreach and education purposes. I for one would say, let's have a discussion about that with a smaller group and then come back to the commission with proposal or ideas, just because it's hard to have a brainstorm in this setting.
I agree with that. Amika, would it be okay
Okay.
if we had somebody, one or one but no more than two other commissioners work with Commissioner Klein to come up with some ideas?
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Can we form that now?
Well, not
I'd
everybody is online, right?
Not everybody's online. That's true, but is there interest from Laura, you, or Bruno to work with Commissioner Klein, and then we can reach out and pull the third from one of the other members, or just have it be a group of two.
Yeah, I could work with Bruno.
So
Sorry.
you want
Sorry, I could work with David. Sorry.
okay. Bruno, do you want to wait and see if one of the other commissioners may have an interest?
I mean, yeah, why don't we ask the other ones? I think I'm happy to join if that's the way we want it. But maybe we should give the others maybe an opportunity to join or decline.
Is that okay with you, Amico, that we form a subcommittee set with Laura and Commissioner Klein, and we reach out to the commissioners that are absent, and if they're not, or if they don't have as much interest as Bruno, then Bruno becomes the third. If one of them is very interested in it, we let one of them become the third member.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll reach out to them.
That help you out, David? Because I know it's something you've been struggling with a little bit, and it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I have been in a little bit of a holding pattern on it. So I'd love to have the ability to speak through some fresh ideas about potential other uses. Yep.
Okay. Well, right now it's you and Laura, and just keep Amico informed of your activities.
Okay. Do you need me to write up a paragraph or something, Miko? Or do you feel like you've got what you need?
No, you don't have to do that. I think we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Why don't we continue on then? And the next item that sort of falls in is with updating the website, and maybe just a status report on that, probably between you, David, and Amico.
I sent graphs over earlier today for the I know that had been an outstanding issue. So to update the graphs. So I see the text has been updated on the website, but the graphs were pending, and the links were foreshadowing future graphs, and now we have the graphs. And the only thing for me is to talk to Miko about whether or not those graphs are in the format needed, if I need to regenerate them somehow. But that would be very quick, whatever format's needed.
Okay, I can take a look at that. I had to shut my email down for the meeting because it gets too much interference. But I'll take a look at that after, and then I'll get back to you on that, David, if there's anything additional.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to sort of group everything else into sort of the catch-all. If there's anything that want to bring up on the balance of our work plan, which would include any of our outreach efforts and Silicon Valley clean energy. So I'd like to sort of throw those on the floor now for updates. And then the last item on the work plan, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the information that Amico connected on Valley Water. So first, let's start with any of the remaining items on the work plan or Silicon Valley clean energy. Any comments from commissioners?
Well, the only comment I had is we had talked about inviting them to come and speak to the commission again and have a chance to ask them questions. I don't know if we've made any progress on that. Kind of like Mission Trail.
Yeah, so I know I wanted Mission Trail first. And so now that I have confirmation of when they will be attending the meeting, I'm going to reach out to SVCE now so that we can make sure that they will be after. So I'm thinking spring or early summer. I'll give them some dates and see when they'll be available. But yeah, I will do that, Bruno.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great.
One thing I think I'm correct here is that Silicon Valley Clean Energy had a program which was geared towards student involvement with small grants to some for student-led programs on education. And I believe the Green Team in Los Altos High School is doing one. They received a small grant from Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and they're going to put on an educational program. So they're formulating it now, and they may need help in getting it advertised, if you will, to reach a wider audience. And if I hear something about that, or maybe Amico, you also have your ear to the ground on that, I'll pass it on to Amico, and maybe we can help them get the word out. Do you know anything further than what I basically briefly outlined, Amico?
No, I don't have anything additional.
Okay. The last thing is Amico included a piece from Valley Water on climate change, their climate change action plan, and I wanted to just open that up for a little bit of discussion amongst the commissioners here, and any thoughts or things that a review of this information stimulate on what we should perhaps be doing in association with Valley Water. And they're another group that either Valley Water or Cal Water Service is another one that we could schedule a sort of update briefing from. Any comments or questions on the Valley Water piece?
Are there things we've done with them in the past?
Not too much with Valley Water. With California Water Service, they've come, it's been about 2 years now, but they've come and presented every 18 months or so of what their program is and the water situation with Los Altos. I'm raising this now because all indications are we're going to be in a water short year. And I think that this is going to bubble up to more urgency, especially if we don't get any more rain or get very little rain. between now and April or May. If there's very little rain, it's really a situation that becomes beyond Cal Water Service, and it becomes a valley water, more valley water focus if we have to run into a situation of limited supplies and reduction of providers, because basically Valley Water provides the water to Cal Water Service. Would commissioners like to hear? I don't know if Valley Water would be interested in talking to us, or would they like to hear information from Valley Water or Cal Water Service, or both?
Well, I
I think
personally
I
would
would.
like to, but I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, what they
Sorry,
sent
Bruno,
us
go ahead.
is interesting. I think it just, I just don't know what the targets are. It would be interesting to understand what the targets are in terms of deadlines, in terms of reductions, because that might be something interesting for us to understand as part of the CAP also.
Yeah, Valley Water has some very, obviously, since they're the major water supplier, they have some very long-range planning. And I don't know how much other commissioners follow. There was a piece in it may have been this morning's paper about, they have plans for an off-stream reservoir up in south of their current reservoir, sort of between here and the state water service dam over in Pacheco, and they just got dealt something where the price of their dam more than doubled, and it putting their whole program on offline storage for more water storage in reconsideration on what they potentially could do. I think it's called their Pacheco Dam. So they're dealing with that, and they're dealing with the tunnel effort and a bunch of other things. So they're dealing with major public works projects. And then, as you can see with this climate change action plan, they're dealing with a lot of local things, like flooding in Coyote Valley and so on and so forth. But I think maybe we hold for another month or two, but I think if we don't get any rain, then water supplies are going to be very short, and we're going to be hearing from Valley Water and California Water Service on what we can do to reach out to our community members for conservation efforts, and also spreading their information on what the situation actually is.
So I'm guessing
So,
that's another invitation at some point down the road.
yeah, I think the invitation's gonna, yeah, I think, they typically have enough offline storage where they can take a drought year, and then the second year of a drought becomes really critical, like we had a few years ago. So if they can probably limp through this next water year, but if it's dry again this following year, there'll be significant problems. But maybe sometime in the fall may be appropriate for either Cal Water Service or Valley Water. Or maybe in the late summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Valley Water, I would want to understand a little better, what particular focus would be for the city of Los Altos. in learning more about their initiatives. I'm just a little hesitant because it's, it's a much broader service area and kind of beyond the scope of what we do, and just aside from it being an educational, presentation. But seeing where we're at after we have our joint meeting with the council and what our priorities are, we maybe kind of have a lot of real things that we're working on as a commission that relate more specifically to the city's efforts. So
I agree with you, Laura. It's very good educational wise, but maybe a good time to think about this maybe when we have a review with the council and see what our priorities are. And by that time, we'll probably know how much rain we had this year and how much of an issue water conservation is going to be. But it's going to start with with Cal Water Service, because they really provide the water to our community. Okay, anything, I guess the last thing on the work plan is I tried to put together sort of some of our thoughts for a draft for next year's plan, and that's attached at the end. We talked about that in detail last meeting. If there's any particular comments on that at this point, we can hear those briefly now and then collect them over the next month or so to sort of flesh this out a little bit more before we go to the council in May. Any comments, or did I miss, was I able to capture our previous discussion, or any additional comments?
So
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Bruno.
no, go ahead. That's fine.
I was just going to say, I mean, I assume this is the written version, and then we'll discuss a little bit more about, we usually include also our accomplishments over the past year, and if there are specific directives or kind of input that we're looking for in terms of prioritization. This is a starting point of the list of everything we're looking at.
That's correct, and I can do some work on that accomplishments for the past year. And questions for basically guidance.
So I'm sorry, but I think I missed it. Where did you have your write-up? Because I didn't see it when I looked at the documents that were sent.
It's the very last page of item 2, and it was on the revised agenda that just went out earlier today. It didn't get included with the first agenda. The first, it's in the final agenda package. It didn't get in the first agenda package.
Okay, so I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it probably isn't a good time to talk about this because of that. But I guess what I'll do is I'll reach out and say I'm looking for comments on it. And Laura is absolutely right that typically we go to the council with a little bit of report that says our accomplishments, and it may have a few questions. We want some guidance on what our work plan is going to be like for the coming year, and then have a draft work plan that then they add to or subtract from. And I can begin work on those first 2 parts of this, and maybe have a draft for consideration at our next meeting. And certainly if anybody has any comments on what is in it so far, I think just root them through Miko, and she'll get them forward to me so that I can be prepared for the next meeting.
Sounds good.
I guess I'll pause here and see if we have any, since this was on items for consideration. I should pause and see if there's any members of the public that want to speak on this, on the topic of our work plan. Okay, hearing none, no comments, then let's move on to the informational item, item number 3. And hopefully the commissioners have had a chance to look at the information included. This item is just for a discussion item, and it includes information that was reached out to us by a resident regarding Citizens Climate Lobby. And we've attached some documents related to the Citizens Climate Lobby proposal and some other comments. Now, the Citizens Climate Lobby, the HR 763 was introduced last year, and there were some comments by other environmental organizations on it. And it wasn't passed or acted upon in the last Congress. And of course, that Congress is, there's a new Congress formed, and this bill could or could not, may or may not be reintroduced. But the Citizens Climate Lobby their proposal was somewhat on the sense that it may be reintroduced into the new Congress. But I thought we should have a little bit of discussion on this topic before proceeding whether or not we want to investigate it further. So let me pause and I'll open it up for commissioner discussion.
Well, maybe I'll start. I think it's a very bad bill. It's not what you would expect in 2020 if you're really serious about climate change. And I can go through all the points that I think are problematic in the bill, but I leave it there for the moment. I think it's not something that we should be thinking about right now, knowing that there is urgency in doing something about climate, and that we only have probably 10 years to really make a dent in what we're doing right now. And that's not going to do anything about it.
Laura or David, do you have any comments?
I did not have a chance to look at it in depth, so I will not comment.
I am in the same boat as Laura.
Okay, well that was one reason for it was a informational item. I think it's as Bruno indicated, it's premature to take a stand on this bill. I think my personal opinion is that a carbon tax may be part of an overall solution or method to aid and respond to the climate crisis. However, you can't give up any other tools that you may have to advance the fight against climate change, because the carbon tax is just one of a potential array of things that are going to be needed to truly fight the situation. And my sense is that the way 763 is currently drafted or was drafted for the last one, it gives up too much of some of those other tools that can be used to fight climate change. It just doesn't go far enough. So I guess I'm in the boat with Bruno a little bit, and if we're not maybe I let it rest there, and we just don't take this issue any further.
So the real question then is, since Miko, you received an email from one of the citizens of the climate citizen committee or whatever it's called, do we have to get back to them at some point? And if yes, when? Because from what I understand, that has come to the Environmental Commission before, correct? Or something similar to that in 2016?
Yes. In 2016, the council did have a resolution supporting, and I don't have it right here in front of me. It was very brief, but Citizens Climate Lobby did approach the council, and the council passed a resolution supporting a carbon tax. Now, there wasn't a specific bill associated with it, but it was sort of recognitions of Citizens Climate Lobby's efforts in that arena. So I'd have to put this as a follow-up to that approach that they did back in 2016. But this time there's sort of, here's specific legislation, and that goes a step further. And if we were to consider something to pose to City Council, we would have to raise it for action at the committee if we're going to propose it. But I think as a commission, citizens can come to us all the time with our ideas and concepts. It doesn't mean that we have to accept and act on them all.
So we don't need to take a position on that particular draft bill.
I think it's premature to take a position on it because the bill has to be reintroduced, or the bill with changes has to be reintroduced. So I don't think we can say anything about the specific legislation because we don't know if it's going to take the same form that it did, or if it's going to be revised, or if it's just not going to reappear. And with the Democratic legislature, I imagine there'll be a lot of additional legislation on the environmental front coming.
Yeah.
I do think at the appropriate time, it would be good for us to evaluate it further and take a position if there is a specific piece of legislation. This is right in line with what we are working on, and I think it would be absolutely appropriate for us to evaluate it and take a vote and at the right time.
Since this is just an informational item, any other questions or comments?
So the only question I have is, again, whether we just don't do anything right now, or we plan to revisit and discuss this HR 763 at the next meeting with all the commissioners having had time to review the document.
We can do one of two things. We can table it and be specific to HR 763, or we can table it and wait to see what type of legislation comes out of the new legislator. And probably, that's, everybody talks about the first 100 days. And I imagine we're going to see some legislation in the first 3 months or so of the new Congress. And then maybe, like as Laura was indicating, maybe at that time we step back and not look just at HR 763, if it appears on it, but we look at it more in total of what's going on. So I guess to answer your specific question, I think we table it and we talk about the legislation in a broader sense when we know what's being developed in Congress. Does that seem reasonable, Bruno?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's it's just since it was in the packet, I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to do with it, and since there was a formal request, I think in the email, to potentially have one of these members invited to discuss the bill, etc. I was wondering if we had to take any action today or in the near future, and if we don't have to, I think that's fine with me.
Yeah, I think if he comes back to Miko with a response, I think our response is that we'll look at upcoming legislation at one of our future meetings, but are not going to have decided not to take up HR 763 at this time.
Sounds good.
Does that make sense, Amico? We're not passing judgment yay or nay. We're just saying that we'll review this along with other legislation, if it's part of that legislation at a future date.
Yes, absolutely.
For the other commissioners, if you haven't had a chance to look at the legislation, it's rather interesting, and I'll just say that there's environmental groups that happen to be on both sides of this issue. Back a year ago, and it continues now. With that, we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, which is city staff updates. I don't know who was in the December council meeting, if there's a report out of the council meeting from one of our commissioners.
Yes, I was in the, what was that, December 14 meeting?
Sounds right.
15, December 15, I'm sorry. No, I didn't have a lot to report on that, except for two things. One is obviously Sally Meadows is now a council liaison, obviously. And there were some questions actually at the council meeting whether there should still be liaisons for every single commission in the future. And I don't think that wasn't resolved at the council. That's just a question that was posed at the time, whether that's something they wanted to continue to do, understanding they have a lot of things on their plate. So maybe we'll have some more details about that in future council meetings. There was a lot of discussions about the community center at the council meeting, which for me was very informational because I didn't know much about the community center up until now. So I was glad to hear that it's going to be a net zero building, which is nice, very nice, and certainly expected at this stage. And that there will be about 7,500 square feet of solar panels. I'm not sure exactly how many kilowatts we're looking at, but I think that should be significant. We'll have to see how that plays, with regards to what the building will be using in terms of electricity and whether there will be some leftovers for other buildings. I don't believe there are any batteries that were included in the buildup of that, the solar panels. I think there's just solar panels, and I'm assuming they are linked to the grid, but that was not discussed at the meeting. But that would be interesting for us to understand a little bit better what the community center is from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint, and how these solar panels are going to offset the consumption of the building itself and maybe more. Whether there are any plans to add batteries or not to that community center to make it really self-sufficient, or whether it's already planned, or whether it's just connected to the grid of the buildings.
So Bruno,
Yeah.
just for your information, we did participate in the design process for the community center, and our primary purpose was to ensure it was 100% electric. You know, the council was very interested in having the solar panels, ensuring those were designed in from the beginning. So that did happen, but no, there's no, at this point, no battery storage. And I don't think that the solar array is sized such that that would be a huge add at this point. They would probably have to add, more solar panels in order to be generating significantly, and just in terms of time of use for the center, probably at this point, I don't know, something that could be looked into, but at this point, there's no battery storage.
Right. Yeah, so it's just for me, obviously, you guys have been involved with this a long time, which is not my case. So I learned quite a bit about the community center, which was very useful. But I think as we look at, again, the climate action plan, and we'll be looking at the buildings and the fleet and so on, I think it would be interesting to look at the community center in the broader context of the city buildings and the city consumption in terms of electricity and so on, and trying to achieve net zero, not just for the community center, but down the road for all the buildings. The city, the government, the city government itself. Right, and that's about it. I think there was some discussion about the Halsey House and what to do with it. But I'm not sure that's something that's relevant to us. It's for more for Parks and Recreation, I guess, to discuss.
I think the community center, I think, is it's going to be a demonstration of the city's commitment to all electric buildings, and I think we should not let that point be not be heard or out front, because I think it's a big step forward.
Yes.
And net zero building, I didn't realize that it was going to be net zero, but that's another big step.
Yeah, that's what they said. So at the meeting. So I think it's great.
Okay, Miko, I'll turn it back over to you about any other staff updates.
We covered most of them in the work plan, but I do have one. I know Laura had mentioned, I don't know if it was at the December meeting or the November meeting, possibly doing a section that could highlight environmental news or articles or various things. And we kind of talked about maybe incorporating that into the city manager's weekly update for the community. So I did talk to the public information officer, and she said we could do that. I think we had kind of talked a little bit about whether we wanted to do something every other week or every month or so. So I thought, maybe even if we started with once a month, she said that would work out. She could highlight a section, once a month, or if, there's a particular month where we feel like there might be something additional, we could even do, every 2 weeks. So that was a yes. And if Laura, you want to work with me on that, it doesn't have to be monthly if there isn't anything, but if there is, we can work together on getting that over to Sonia. And there's always stuff that I'm giving her as well that I can work with Sonia on, but I wanted to let you know that we can definitely do that.
That's great. Thank you.
And
Laura, do you want to take the lead then, at least for the first one with Amico? And then, obviously if we can pull other people in from the commissioner, if there's, like an upcoming event on something that a subcommittee is working on, we can have somebody else work with Amico to get another news brief out.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we'll put you at the lead, Laura, at least for the first, and we can switch off the lead as other things come up.
And I just need for the future council meetings, February 9th and February 23rd. And
I'll take the 9th.
have Commissioner Humayun for the 12th of January and Lei Wand for the 26th.
I heard
Okay, I can
David.
David, I'll take the 9th.
David, you'll take the 9th? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And I can take the 23rd.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
David and Laura. Anything else on staff updates, Miko? If not, move on and see if there's any commissioner reports or comments and future agenda items.
Nothing else for me.
This is David. I just have one fun fact. So a couple of years ago, I started a design build firm that's focused on ADUs. And at this point in time, we have more than 25 projects all over the Bay Area, 2 in Los Altos. But except for one, they're all electric. And I'm giving people a choice, sort of. I say, you okay with our all electric? And everybody is saying, yes, that's what we want. And so I'm finding that really interesting. I thought it would be much more of a, discussion about the pros and cons. But yep, it feels to me from that experience, and maybe it's specific to the ADU space, but feels like everybody's embracing that future around here in the Bay Area.
That's a hopeful sign.
Yeah, that's good.
Any other commissioner reports or comments?
No, I just attended a conference, video conference on the state of plastics. Because of what we're doing with single-use plastics, I wanted to get quickly up to date on where we are today in the US. I followed that up with publications that came out not a long time ago that actually goes over the state of plastics in the US. I just don't think it's the time and stage to talk about this in details, but I think it's obviously not very good. As you can imagine, there are a lot of issues around plastic use, how much plastic we discard, and what it does to the environment. But I think we'll have many occasions of revisiting this, and when we talk about single-use plastics and when we talk about the climate action plan as well.
I will add to that I told you that I got involved a little bit and talked to Senator Allen's aide and things like that. But actually, the link was through how I got connected with that was I happened to get notice of a report that was issued out of the state. And one of the bills that was passed in January was for the governor to appoint a commission on recycling markets and curbside recycling. And I happened to get connected through somebody else to the chair of that commission. And she's actually the woman that put me in touch with the aide from Senator Allen. But if you have an interest, this commission is 2 reports. They had to have their first report out before the first of the year, and they actually issued it something like December 12th or something on basically the main objectives for the recycling market. And they have a second report that's due out July 1, and that's according to the appointment of this commission. And it's called the California Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. And a very interesting report. If you want to Google it, I think I might have passed this on to you, Amico, with the link. You can share it with the other commissioners if they want to look at the report. The first report is interesting in what they sort of identify what the big issues regarding recycling and recycling markets and curbside recycling. And it talks about what you were talking about earlier about the transportation of recycled materials and all kinds of things. But the second report, I think it will be even more interesting because it'll talk about the markets within the state and how to develop the recycling markets within the state. So if you could share that with other commissioners, and if they wish to learn more about recycling, it's the first part's it's sort of a good primer or primer on some of the issues. And I think the second report due in July 1 is going to be of interest and may form a lot of the direction that the state is going to take on their recycling program and probably legislation as well. I'll give you one sort of tidbit though, that the number one problem that they identify is with the recycling market is the risk of fires. And if you think back, there's been a couple of instances of fires at recycling facilities, and the danger that putting the wrong stuff in recycling boxes can create. And so the second issue deals with batteries, proper disposal of batteries. And then there's lots of other things in there as well, but interesting. Okay, anybody else have things that they want to add? So potential future agenda items. I think probably, Amico, the one thing we probably should pick up on is status of the climate action plan at the next meeting. So it'll be kicked off and we'll know a little bit more about the schedule and when input maybe, when they may be looking for input or comments and that type of thing.
Yes, I will add that.
Anybody else for future agenda items?
Well, the only thing is, if you have your meeting with the staff by the end of this month, I don't know if we need to put the single-use plastic back on the agenda for next month, depending on what comes out of the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a good idea would be to get the subcommittee together after that meeting.
Yeah.
So I'll be sending out some possible dates for the subcommittee.
Sounds good. And then how do you want to deal with all the little brainstorming session we had at the end of last meeting about what we could do in 2021 and your draft?
I think send comments to Amico. I'll try and flesh out improve upon that draft for the next meeting and perhaps put in our accomplishments and major questions we have. And then we'll discuss those and build on that and make changes that are appropriate. So you can send your comments through Amico, and then we'll get a second draft out that we can discuss at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
I think we're about wrapped up, and I saw Sally click on the video.
I wanted to thank you for letting me join you this evening. I also wanted to pick up on Commissioner Delagno's comments about the December meeting and the question about the role, if any, of council people to liaison to the commission, which will in theory be discussed at the January offsite, though nothing's really offsite now. You're always sitting in your room on Zoom, but let's call it an offsite. So that'll be on Saturday, January 30th. So if any of you want to, send me feedback on what you see the role of a commission liaison, or if you see any role at all, what utility can the role add? Obviously, I wasn't adding any utility, but so what you think it can do, what it doesn't do, do you need it? Do you want it? And because that discussion will potentially be happening on January 30th. All right.
Time set for that, or an agenda, Sally, yet?
I haven't seen the agenda. It's an all-day thing. It's the council priorities. I'm guessing it starts at 9 a.m. I haven't seen the agenda yet, but there will be a time for public comment at the beginning, as always, and then it'll be going through the priorities. It's a facilitated meeting. I'm expecting it to be most of the day, but I haven't sat through one before, so we will see. But yeah, so I'm definitely looking for input because it's a topic that I brought up at the December meeting, and I'm, any input you can give me on the value or lack thereof, and how you think it could be better, or if it's needed at all, that would be great. And you can just, my email is smeadows@losaltosca.gov. So.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good work.
Thank you. I'll send her email out and just a reminder to the commission.
Yeah, and don't feel you have to get to me, but if you have some comments, please feel free to send them my way. And we can, or just send me an invitation to chat. We can do a phone call or something. So, but no need to follow up if you have nothing that you want to add. So, all right.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation tonight. And if there's nothing else Amico or any commissioner has, we'll close the meeting at this time. Any last commissioner comments or anything? Okay, well then I look forward to talking with everybody in a month and communicating through Amico during the month.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Night.